with, really important. What more could you want? But that's what it is. And again, I'm blessed by working with great colleagues who are really committed to getting it right. I mean, fully appreciate how important it is that we get it right, and do everything we possibly can to bring the best thinking, the best analysis, and debate things, over and over until we feel like we're in the right place. At the same time, there is no certainty in this. You can be wrong because the economy can zig when you thought it was going to zag.
So your term as Fed chair ends about a year from now. What do you think about your job security?
I fully intend to serve all of my term.
Excellent. I mean, as we're getting close to wrapping up, I did want to ask something a little bit out of the box. I think because you do have a position of such great responsibility, people are very curious about you, and I think people tend to read into everything a Fed chair does, small gestures, word choice. I know it's part of our jobs in this room to pore over every word you choose. I did want to ask about one thing that I've wondered about for years, which is your tie. You always seem to wear a purple tie, and every time I think I've seen you, you've worn a purple tie, and I'm wondering if there's significance to that?
Well, at the beginning, the only significance was that I like purple ties.
Okay.
But I will say, so then the next press conference, I reach for a blue tie or a red tie, and I go, maybe not, And so I wind up wearing purple ties. And then it becomes a thing, and now I definitely wear purple ties all the time.
Okay.
But I felt like, it just felt a little awkward to be wearing one that was identified. We are strictly non-political. I can't stress that enough. We are not, it's not that we're bipartisan, we are non-political. We don't do that, and so purple is a good color for that. That's all. Plus I like purple ties.
Sorry, I didn't give you a purple guitar pick. I have one other Milwaukee question that I overlooked here, but in Milwaukee and other parts of the country, the housing market is out of whack. In our market alone, in southeastern Wisconsin, there's 5,000, the market's out of whack by like 5,000 houses that need to be on the market for it to have equilibrium. And a report this week said tariffs could tack on some $6,000 to the cost of building a new home. How long are people going to sit on their cheap mortgages from COVID? Thank you very much. And before they move on, before the market frees up?
So you have several things there. The first is we just haven't built enough housing, and we haven't kept up with the demand for housing. So there's an underlying shortage. Before the pandemic, there was a real housing shortage. And by the way, that's happening in many comparable democracies around the world. The second thing is, lock-in, as you say. There were very, very low mortgage rates during COVID, and people are kind of locked in. It would be very expensive to move, and that'll of course wear off over time. You also mentioned, the costs of materials that might be imported, lumber and nails and things like that. And yeah, and also labor. A lot of labor from in the home building business has been traditionally immigrant labor. So yeah, the sort of new build market, it may face some cost pressures as well. That may very well be the case. That's what we're hearing from home builders, for example, both on the labor side and on the materials side. But even once these short-term things happen, we're still going to have not enough houses. And so it's all, I think for a long time, we're still going to see upward pressure on housing prices, maybe until population growth slows or until we catch up.
You mentioned that we're kind of in a period of waiting right now to see how policy ripples out through the economy. How long do you expect that to take? How long do you expect these big policy changes to show up in our day-to-day lives, in prices and supplies and things like that?
I mean, for a while, we didn't know what was coming on April 2. Now we know what came on April 2. We don't know. There's a lot more to be said about how all that shakes out. But we've come through that, and I think you now know that the tariffs are larger than people were generally expecting. That much you know now at this point. And you'll know more as you start to see the effects on the economy. So as the months go by, it's hard to say exactly when you'll know. But clearly that learning process is ongoing. We're just seeing that these are new policies, not just the tariff policies, but the other ones as well. They'll be important fiscal legislation coming up fairly soon. And there'll be regulatory changes, significant regulatory changes. You have to really look at all of that to see what the overall effect will be. So I can't give you a date, but all of that is now kind of coming into place at sort of the speed you would expect policy changes to be, and then we'll begin to see the real economic effects as the year goes on. But again, I can't give you a really specific date. Is the fiscal legislation the tax cuts? Well, yes. I mean, I know they're contemplating, and again, we don't comment on fiscal policy, but what I read is that they're contemplating, making the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act cuts permanent, and also perhaps some other things as well. We wouldn't be. We have sort of a placeholder for that too, but that's really not ours to comment on. But that's what I was talking about. Yes.
So I have a question from a friend in Milwaukee who said she has clients that have deals ready to go, businesses that are ready to launch from their garage to a private equity deal, and they're just stuck in their garage right now. How long do you think, what do you think the impact of the uncertainty these days will have on the private equity deals?
So again, we're hearing a lot of that. People are they're just kind of waiting for clarity. So, and I can't tell you when that will pass, but ultimately it will pass. We know that at a certain point we'll know enough to know what the uncertainty will decline, and we'll be able to see with real clarity what the policies are and what their effects are. So, you're right. We hear the same thing from businesses and from people that they're kind of waiting and seeing. There's a lot of waiting and seeing going on, including by us, and that just seems like the right thing to do at a time of elevated uncertainty. What economic indicators are you watching right now? I mean, very famously, you look at the CPE and obviously the CPI and things like that, but are there any economic indicators in this moment, in these circumstances, that you are watching, focused on? Sure. Interested in? So the basic two big data pools are the data around prices and around employment. And we get, in the employment area, we get just really, that's an area where we actually get pretty good data, although the survey response rates have been lower. Nonetheless, we get a lot of different data, and it's not just unemployment, it's participation, it's by age group and things like that. It's wages, it's many, many different things. It's jobs, it's quits, all the job creation, quits, openings, all those things. So that's one thing. On inflation, we target PCE, personal consumption expenditure inflation, not CPI, and the two are broadly, they move they move together, but 25 years ago, the Fed switched to PCE. The public looks at CPI. It's kind of a little bit of a thing, but because we think, it's really just a better way to capture the inflation, the cost pressures that households and businesses feel. We think it's a better measure, and that's what we look at. But they're not that different. I mean, they look at different measures. Ultimately, they're pretty close together. Those things. On growth, you look at what's happening with consumer spending. The economy is overwhelmingly driven by consumer spending. So you look at how are consumer surveys, how are they feeling, how are they spending? Sometimes the surveys are very negative, but they keep spending. That's been happening really for a while. People spent right through the pandemic, and they spent right through this time of higher inflation. They kept spending, and forecasters kept thinking, like us, kept thinking that consumption would slow down. But that's a really critical thing. After that, business investment is a big chunk, and you look at that, and that is also susceptible to sentiment. Businesses, if they don't know what to do, they're not going to do an acquisition. They're going to hold off on building a factory or a plant or hiring people and things like that. So we look at, I could go on for a long time. We look at a lot of data, and we try to make sense. We also talk to people who are in the real economy. I grew, my career was mostly in the private sector, talking to people who ran businesses. And for me, the story doesn't come together until I actually hear from people who are in the economy doing things and what they're feeling and seeing, and then it sort of fits together better. This is like via the Beige Book, or just the Beige Book? Thank you for mentioning the Beige Book, and I hope you read it. I love the Beige Book. See, that's great. Everyone should read the Beige Book. The Beige Book comes out sort of mid-FOMC cycle, and it's all the 12 reserve banks and all of their incredible context, what they're saying about what's going on in the economy. So if you want to know you know, you can look at the national data, but if you want to know what's going on in regions and at different industries, you look at the Beige Book. So it's really a critical thing. And actually, the Reserve Bank system that we have is an enormous strength of the Federal Reserve System. We have these 12 reserve banks with their own, you know, economics departments and own participants on the FOMC. So that's a great thing to look at.
I'd like to ask you about another body of work that many of us know that you're familiar with, and that's the Grateful Dead. So, question for you, sir. American Beauty or Terrapin Station?
American Beauty.
Well, it's not even a
Not
pause.
even close.
That was
Ask me a
so
hard one.
fast.
Working
No,
Man's,
that's my era. That's my era.
Working Man's Dead or
Yes.
Europe 72?
Oh, both. Yeah,
Well,
that's
come
my
on.
era. We're in the same era here. So that's, for me, it's late 60s to mid 70s. So
Touch of Grey, what do you think?
it was their only hit, but it's a good song.
Okay.
Yeah.
Finally,
Are we
there's,
going to do this?
I feel like you're speaking another language.
there's a well-known Grateful Dead bootlegger who, with the, I believe the permission of the band, Dick's Picks, who's put
Yeah.
out. So what's your recommendation of those hundreds of
I
Dick's Picks?
don't have any Dick's Picks. Like I said,
Come
my
on.
real interest was late 60s to mid 70s.
Yeah.
And I saw them a bunch of times, and I know every note on every song from that era, but since then, I've been busy, actually.
Well, we thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us here, and we appreciate your work.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.